Today's insight was inspired by the funeral Karima and I attended recently in London of an amazing young man who left our world at a very young age. He was in his early 40s. At his memorial service, I listened carefully to all the tributes that flowed from so many people whose life he had touched in very special ways, through generous sharing of his medical knowledge, contacts, and resources, and sometimes with his mere smiling and happy presence. It was clear that this young man had changed many lives for the better. Then I reflected on my own experiences with him, and we shared many together, and we were blessed with some very special memories together. And today I would like to take a look at human interactions from 35,000 feet above, where the big picture is evident. So my dear friends, we are all here in this world to learn, gain experience, and derive knowledge from everything life presents us with, be it people, relationships, places, and more. But how do we actually learn from life? What is this mechanism of learning that we have all lived through but do not always appreciate or realize? I call it exemplary learning. Now, what do I mean by exemplary learning? You see, each one of us sets an example for others to learn from. Our life, the way we live, think, communicate, and act becomes an example for our fellow beings to learn from. Similarly, their lives and thoughts and actions serve to teach us, so we are constantly learning through and from one another. We are coaches or teachers to one another, and it is important for us to recognize this. So many of us live in our own heads, and we can be quite self-centered. And unfortunately, being self-centered stops us from seeing beyond ourselves. And that defeats the purpose of living here in this material world. Because learning is a two-way process, or on a broader scale, a multiple-way process. And people living in their own self-centers actually end up not participating in a core purpose of their lives, which is to contribute towards exemplary learning. Now look at it this way. Each of us has a piece of chalk and a blackboard. Remember our days at school. The learning we receive from others is written on our blackboard. And the teaching we share with others is written on their boards by our chalk. So as a minimum, each one of us has to participate in these two functions to make life work. Therefore, if all we see is ourselves, we are not going to be able to use our chalk well, nor our board. And we may end up leaving this world with very little accomplished on that front. So, if we can accept that we are a coach to our fellow beings, then it brings into question the quality of teaching we are putting out. We have to be conscious of the examples we are setting for others, because that will shape their lives accordingly. In essence, through our examples, we are collectively creating the world around us. And likewise, the people we surround ourselves with are also shaping us, as they write on our board with their chalk. Therefore, my dear friends, we have to start considering our role in this world at many levels. Firstly, in this world and what happens in it, in the lives of the people around us, what role do we play? What role do we play in our families, in the lives of our families, our children, our loved ones, and lots more. So we have an amazing role that we play in our lives, whether we realize it or not. If you had the job of a coach, you would prepare your teaching ahead of class. You would think about your messaging and your actions as you want your students to learn from the best examples you are putting forth. So let's start thinking of ourselves as coaches from today, and also be open to listening and receiving as students. Now, coming back to this young man whose funeral we attended, let us call him Al. Al was a very interesting person. He was not your typical human being. Al was larger than life. He loved life and made sure he enjoyed every moment of it. And that also got him into trouble very often because he did not always respect human-made rules. He followed his heart every single time and found happiness in every moment. And then he spread that happiness to the rest of us. Now, I would like to share with you today 5 examples from Al's life that had a profound impact on me. And this is how we will see exemplary learning in action. Firstly, Al's ethos was that happiness is a choice. He always chose happiness over rules, regulations, and concerns about what others thought of him. How many of us can live like that, where we choose to strive and be happy, irrespective of our circumstances or people's opinions of us? It's not easy. Now, I'm not saying that one should be reckless, which Al tended to be sometimes, like all of us do, but rather than think of it from the recklessness side, I would say by choosing happiness, I believe we win over being sad, pressured, and depressed. The choice is ours, and that was Al's lesson to us. Some scriptures also say, and I paraphrase, that the Creator has placed you here in this world amidst joys and challenges. And it is the obligation of every human being to strive to be happy, irrespective of their circumstance. To rejoice in life is an act of faith, because joy reflects trust in the order of creation. And of course, this is not always easy to implement, but young Al did it beautifully. The second lesson Al left with us was to live in a way where you always express your love through your words and actions. Al and I would speak quite often, and at the end of every conversation, he always said to me, "I love you, man, and remember that." Every conversation. He left no one with any doubt about how he felt about them. If he loved you, you knew. And I heard this as a common thread from most people during his memorial. Many of us love someone, but we don't tell them that. We expect them to read our minds and actions. And Al took that mystery right out of his relationships and made his feelings clearly known. Today he's gone, but I know how much he loved me, and that's the gift he left me with. And this raises the question, are we all doing the same with our loved ones? If not, it's a good time to start. I once read a quote by Khalil Gibran which said, "Between what is said and not meant, and what is meant and not said, most of love is lost." I will repeat that. So it's a lovely saying. Between what is said and not meant, and what is meant and not said, most of love is lost. Al gave very good expression to this saying, especially the second part, meant but not said. So let's start expressing our love towards people that we love openly, with our words, with our actions, and let's leave no doubt in their minds where they stand, the place we hold for them in our hearts. Sometimes we may not get that chance to say it, because time will run out. The third lesson that I drew from Al's life was that of empathy. What does empathy really mean? Empathy is the ability to feel another's inner world without needing to fix it. Empathy allows us to step into another's experience. Empathy is understanding how someone feels, and empathy listens with the heart. Like Rumi says, "Why are you busy with your own thoughts? Open your heart and feel the presence of others." This is exactly what Al projected in his thoughts, words, and actions. Al actually lived empathy in a world that can be so harsh and challenging. There's a difference between living with empathy and living empathy. Al lived empathy. His empathy showed in the way he helped strangers get the best medical help by going out of his way to open doors for them, giving them advice, and holding their hand through that process. Al himself, on his own, was pretty successful in his own career, which was very time demanding. But he always made time for others. He was never too busy. He always made time for others because, as I said before, he lived empathy. When you live empathy, you do not pause to think of yourself before helping others. It is very tough to do in a world that demands so much from us and consumes our time in a manner that few of us can control, because we yield to circumstances so obediently without ever pausing to ask why. Well, Al was certainly not one of the obedient ones. One day, as we were looking at Al's photographs, he proudly showed me his favorite picture of him lying on the street next to a homeless man. I believe it was in London. "Why did you do that?" I asked. "I mean, the street was cold and filthy. Why did you feel you had to do that?" He said, "I had to feel what this man was experiencing." That's what living empathy is all about, my dear friends. The fourth lesson from Al's life was, you can live your dreams if you are willing to work for it. Al was a very passionate sportsman. He loved cricket and soccer in particular. He had a very successful medical practice in London, but decided to go for his dream, which was to be a doctor for one of Britain's top teams. One day he called me to discuss what he was planning to do because it was a pretty drastic step. And he was planning to give up his thriving practice and go back to university to do an advanced course on sports medicine. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked him. He said he was absolutely 100% sure and was willing to do whatever it took. And my dear friends, Al did just that. He gave up everything for 2 years and focused totally on his studies and got the qualifications he needed to go for his dream shot. With all the passion, dedication, and effort Al had put in, how could the universe not open the best doors for him? And so he did end up serving on a major British soccer team, which subsequently won the championship league. And I've never seen him so happy, holding and kissing this massive, shiny team trophy. Al had a dream, and he got to experience it fully, not just by dreaming, but by actually acting on it and making all the sacrifices required. So that was the fourth lesson Al left us with. You can absolutely live your dream if you are willing to commit yourself fully to it. And finally, the fifth lesson I derived from Al's life was about living in the present. For Al, Every moment was precious, and he lived it to the fullest. Khalil Gibran put it very nicely. He says, yesterday is but today's memory, and tomorrow is today's dream. I'll repeat that. Yesterday is but today's memory, and tomorrow is today's dream. What lies in between? The present. In all the years I knew Al, I rarely saw him sitting looking worried or dejected. He was always smiling and admiring life. Al actually admired every moment, and he was not going to waste it by living in the past or worrying about the future. He lived every moment fully. I remember one day he and I were sitting at the waterfront at sunset, and I shared with him my concern about some of his choices and their impact on his health. As the older one of the two, it was okay for me to do that. I said to him, if you keep up this pace, you won't make it to 60. So he got up from his chair, he came over, sat next to me, put his arm around my shoulder, looked right into my eyes with his smile and said, I'm here right now, aren't I? We are having a good time together in this beautiful place, aren't we? Why worry about getting to 60? Let's enjoy what we have now. For me, that said it all. He had fully grasped the value of the present, and he was so clear about the fact that the future was nothing more than a projection of things that may or may never transpire. So rather than worry about the future, he met each moment that came his way with confidence and, above all, admiration. Al tried to cram in everything he could in his short time on earth. He visited most of the world and experienced grassroots culture where he went. He would leave his hotel and wander off for hours into areas that most tourists would avoid or not consider visiting. But Al was never a tourist anywhere. He was woven into the fabric of humanity itself, irrespective of time, quality of place, or circumstance. He loved to eat and drink with the locals. Sometimes he ate at places and drank local brews he called dodgy, but fun. Al saw and experienced the world like few of us are likely to do. Unless we shift our thinking, depart from our biases, drop our fears, and begin to live fully in the present. There is a whole world ahead of us to explore, and I don't just mean by traveling. I mean by observing mindfully all the little things we miss while being consumed in our blinding little whirling cyclones in our heads. My dear friends, most of us live only 10% of our lives in the present. At best, we waste 90% of it living or wallowing in the past, or worrying about, or fearing the future. So if one of us were to die at the age 70, and an account was taken at the gates of the universe of how long we had lived, we would get a credit for only 7 years lived, i.e. 10% of 70. For Al, he lived some 40 full years in the present. We would need to live 400 years to experience what he did. That is the power of the present. Love life. Live in the present and admire each moment with the awe that it deserves. That was Al's ethos. Like Rabindranath Tagore says, the butterfly counts not months but moments, and therefore it has enough time. The butterfly counts not months but moments, and therefore it has enough time. That was Al, the butterfly. And that's the fifth gift he left us with. So my dear friends, this is how exemplary living works. And I only shared 5 lessons I derived from Al's life. There are lots more. Like us all, he had his faults too, and they too were something for us to learn from. Remember, each one of us is a teacher or a coach like Al, living by example. Let us give the world our best and flourish within it too. This is the insight I wished to share with you all today. And I believe we have much to think about because we are at the heart of exemplary living, and we can try to do our best to put out the best teaching we can and to be the best listeners to receive the teachings that come our way, listeners and observers.